Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Conversations in Ken's Cafe. I'm your host, Ken Somerville, and we have a returning guest, Matthew, blah, blah, blah. I don't think I had enough coffee this morning. Matthew, thank you so much for coming back and giving us updates on what you've been doing. So instead of going over, because you've already introduced yourself on our last show, you're going to be introducing yourself again on Monday with Leighton. So I think we can just pretty much jump in to updates on what you've been doing, because you work a lot with kids and your community. So please give us some updates on what's going on.
Right on. Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it. I want to start with a question though. Where's the cafe, Ken? Because I'm looking for the cafe. There
Well,
it is.
I've got mine. If you don't have a herbal tea going on, then you're really in trouble. Okay.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna have to take a little pause here. It's 103 today here in Oroville, Fahrenheit. Fahrenheit.
Yep.
Yeah. We were just talking about the conversions before we started. uh, which is to you Canadians and Europeans and the rest of the world, because the U.S. does everything differently over here. That's damn hot.
Yes.
That's damn hot. So no herbal teas. I could have an iced tea for sure, but I didn't have one today. Yeah, so I've been busy as always. I've been though consolidating a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
things that I'm doing. I was wrapping up at the time we met the first day of spring, March 21st, and it was a transitional time where I was still doing a lot of my contracting work. I like to do my work kind of like first part of spring up until it gets damn hot, which is right about now.
Yep.
And I don't really prefer to be out doing that kind of work in the heat of the summer. We have sort of two dormancy periods here. Although I would say that the summer dormancy is like more critical almost than the winter dormancy, because there's still a lot of stuff that I'm okay doing in the valley anyways, in the winter. So for those who don't remember, if you want to know more about me and kind of like my background, we did that in the last episode. So check out the last episode that I was on there. But I'm in Oroville, California, which is like north and a little east California, and we're right in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountain range. And I kind of keep one foot in Oroville in the valley on the edge of the foothill to the valley, and I keep my other foot up in the mountains, Berry Creek, which is between 2,500 and 4,000 feet. My family's property that I've worked at for a long time, it burned in the fires back in 2020. That's at about 2,700 feet. And then the property that my biggest clients, former property of Dr. Lane Ingham, the Soil Food Web School, is up at 4,000 feet, and that's where I work most of the time.
And,
And
and just to pause there, if you guys remember the Oroville Dam and the worries about the
yeah,
Oroville Dam bursting, this is Oroville, California. So
California, yeah.
just to give you guys a little idea, because most people should remember that incident from a few years back.
Yeah, we've got all the disaster news over here. It's if you look up Oroville, it's not all good things. Um, yeah, the spillway incident was massive. And then of course we're right next to Paradise, California.
Mm-hmm.
But say we're in the land of fire, and it's hell or high water. Like another thing we say, is whether it's a fire or floods, we've had our experiences. We're very well adapted now to disasters and
Mm-hmm.
evacuations, emergency response, which in one way is a way to make people pretty resilient, and a lot of really interesting people have come out of here because of that, and been connected with a lot of really amazing folks, a lot of incredible knowledge has come out from that. So the
Mhm.
Paradise fires, of course, people know about Paradise, California. Uh,
Yeah.
Back in 2018, the Campfire was the name, which is a crazy name. And yeah, so 51% of Butte County or more at this point has burned since 2016, I want to say, something like that. So we've had of
Yeah.
our land mass, so we're one of the biggest counties in California, and you can imagine that 50+% of our land mass has burned. Um,
Mhm.
Really pretty big deal there. Um, and so yeah, so Oroville, and the mountains here, it's a very diverse place. It's really amazing. And anyways, right now it's really hot. And so going back to your question is, I was doing a lot of stuff at the time, wrapping up projects, transitioning into new projects. But my ultimate goal has been to consolidate and try to have more time for my family.
Mhm.
And I have 2 kids. I'm a single dad, and having time to be able to move them around and get them to the different things, and also, just kids, you need that flexibility
Oh
design
yeah.
into your life. So I've been really working hard to try to design that in to my life. And so yeah, they always know that the spring and the fall are kind of a big time, and I get support from family and friends sometimes to help them during that time. It's kind of where I make a big chunk of money now with my landscaping business. Mainly doing earthworks has been my big projects over the last couple years. Been more and more focused on that. We talked about that last time. Um,
Mhm.
Realizing the importance of hardscaping is really important. Setting the stage, the palette, if you will, of the sites. Even if it's just a little bit of movement, you don't want to have to come back and do it later. So I like to try to help people shape their properties, put in
Mhm.
right positions for roads, access, water systems, piping, and so forth. So that when you get into the fun stuff that we all like to talk about, the soil building and um, the plants and the trees and the, diversity and all this, then you have a great palette to work from. You're really working in an exponentially better position.
Well,
And so,
setting up the foundation, especially of moisture, because we all have to have moisture, whether plant, animal, human, doesn't matter. That moisture is so important to have
mhm,
available. And, guys, if you don't understand when he's talking about earthworks, talking about capturing water, putting up berms, wallapeenies, different methodologies globally used around the world on capturing water to keep it on our own properties,
mhm.
to let it soak in so that your property is more resilient and it's gathering more water, because the more you do this, the more comes back to you.
Absolutely. And then doing some of the stuff that's not as sexy in the
Mhm.
toolkits, but like French drains and digging lines for pipe and or digging a root cellar or something for a
Mhm.
client. Because I say, okay, everything you want to do that involves an excavator or whatever machine
Let's
that
get
we
it
have,
done while we have it.
when we have it, because it's
Yeah.
it's the most valuable time. So it's like you're paying me for my time, and I'm setting, I'm giving you a time budget, but also it's possible. I'm always trying to, I'm getting better and better at it, but I'm always trying to um, be conservative with my budget and give
Yeah.
myself extra time. And so that when that happens, when I can always come back to a client and say, actually, you're $5,000 underbid, and here's,
Yeah.
you don't you saved money. And they go, wow. And and sometimes they'll say, that's great, I'm going to keep it. Or they're going to say, hey, keep going, like, let's do some
Yeah.
more stuff and let's fill that time. So I like to do that. And so I say, hey, we got a piece of equipment for a week. Like, literally, like, I want you to go and think of all your fantasies, of what we could
Yeah.
do, even if it's roughing it out, and not have, you can come back later or something, but like while we have this equipment, let's do
Hmm.
what we can do with it. Um, the chaoticness of the earthworks stuff is often the things that people need to understand too. And I often refer to my spirit animal, the beaver, when I talk about this. And when you look at a beaver doing its work initially, it looks like chaos. It's like it's a work scene there,
Yeah.
and it's cutting all these trees down, and it's everything scattered is mucky, and it's just like wild looking, it's crazy. And then this harmony comes afterwards, and so you have to kind of be able, in most of these regenerative systems, you have to have, you have to stretch your um, time scales
Yes.
out. It's the biggest one. Like, and often too, like, I tell people, especially if you're nowadays, oh my God, when you're used to immediate gratification from different things, right? Most people nowadays are very um, set up for that. And but even compared to like conventional growing or whatever, um, you need to have a bit of time, where you can kind of like not pay so much attention, or not, at least not focus so hard on something. You know how it is. You feed that amendment a natural organic amendment, and it's like, if you're looking at that tree, you're not seeing it. You come back a week later, a couple weeks later, and you see it and you go,
Hmm.
oh wow, and you see the results. Often my friends will tell me things that I don't see because they're not here all the time. They'll come back and they'll be like, wow, man, that thing really grew. I'm like, did it really? Okay. I'm looking at it every day. But yeah, you have to stretch your view of time. You have to be okay with a bit of a mess at first, a bit of chaos, getting it done. But then we clean it up real quick. I like personally to do a lot of my work in the fall, because you can then, like, cover crop, and then the rains come, cover crop or mulch, and then the rains come, and then everything starts to grow. At least here, maybe not for you, Ken, up there. Maybe not so much. You guys probably want to do your stuff in summertime. I'm almost guessing, because that's going to be your most like sure time that you're not going to have rains and not have temperature issues and stuff like that. And you most of the places up there, you have pretty good water um,
Hmm.
situation, right? So it's more of a water mitigation thing in many other parts of the world too. If you got a lot of rain, it's where you put it, how you use it. Sometimes it's moving water off the site too.
Yeah.
It's like pick it up, move it out, kind of thing. But anyway, so yeah, I've been doing a lot of earthworks projects. Actually, for my neighbor here, I did a big pond project and as well. So we're actually in a really water abundant place, but not naturally, in a sense. These systems here are the old canal flume systems
Okay.
that were set up back when they did the state water projects in California. Whatever you think about all that, and definitely trust me, I have my, I'm not.
Opinions.
I have my opinions about it. I mean, obviously, I'm not favor. I do not like big dams, big massive changes in river systems and all this kind of stuff. I'm
Hmm.
definitely not. Like, we put houses in places they shouldn't be. And, go back to some other big tragedies we're seeing right now, and many other places of the world. We looked at, maybe 100-year markers, but not 1,000-year markers. We weren't looking at the 1,000-year storm realities. And even though, you can see evidence of certain things even in hundreds, 100 or so things. We also have to realize that we're changing the environments dramatically. But
Yeah.
there was some good things they did. And one of the things that they did that I think, and I'm fully supportive of, is these flume systems, where they basically sent water from a main water body river, whatever it is, off contour by, say 1-2%, and they sent it through multiple areas. Here, these go probably, I'd say, about 50 miles, flumes
Right.
that spiderweb their way all throughout the foothills here and drop down into different elevation grades and help. And they all go back to the same watershed, you know.
Yeah.
And I would say, the argument for me is that, well, for one, because of the removal of the wetlands, it's even more important. And then also because they cut down the old growth trees back in the late 1800s, early 1900s.
Yeah.
Also, then, which slowed the water significantly. You had, also imagine the mycelial networks and the fungal networks and the diversity in those old growth forests that sponged the water. So since that was removed, then I would argue that, like, we really, really need to do something, anything, to help slow the water. And if it's being used in a reasonable way, it's helping rehydrate the landscape. So you have all these water systems running throughout, and it's like where if you get a 1-inch pipe fully opened all day, it's like equivalent to like $30 a month,
Mhm.
as much water as you want to use out of a 1-inch pipe, basically off of the flume. But they also have a pressurized system that runs alongside it. That's all gravity pressure, but it comes out, I think it starts at the highest end, like maybe 30 psi, but by the time it gets to here, it's about 50, 60
Right.
psi. That goes to properties that can't go directly from the flume, the open ditch. Um, but it's moving water, so it's essentially living water. It's So it's a lot more active biologically than water you get through a pipe, that's pumped out of the ground. It's not coming from the aquifer, and slowly pulling down our water table. And it's incredible, and like I can see so many ponds and green spaces all along these flumes everywhere. And back in the 40s, they actually encouraged people to put in ponds and gave them a
Yeah.
tax incentive for it. And so that's why you see some of these old pond systems and maybe connected to some kind of a cattle grazing operations or whatever, livestock, but
Mhm.
which you can have different opinions about. But at regenerative farmers, we know, done the right way, it's good, and done the wrong
Yeah.
way, not good. But but like, it is an incredible value upgrade to these systems. So this property here is pretty amazing. So this is my new home since about a year now, that I've been living at, and I have the flume right below the house, and
Okay.
I can use it. Although I haven't gardened, this is actually the first time I haven't gardened in like 17 years, 16 years.
Are you
Uh,
missing it? Do you have withdrawals?
well, can't say I'm not gardening. I'm not gardening at my own house,
Okay.
and so this is a reality of like, um, wow, I'm getting paid to garden all these places, and then,
Mhm.
like, I'm always getting extra food, and I'm being given and bringing it home, and it's like I have more than I need. And I have friends right down the street who already have established gardens. I just moved here, and I thought about it for a minute. I was like, well, what if I don't garden? I just kind of help my friends a little bit more, and I
Mhm.
just, and then I go to work and I come home with stuff, and it's actually really liberating, for the first time. It's sort of like a succession, and in a natural system, where it's like I have finally reached a point where through my work, I've created this abundance thing where I can actually yield from that and not have to have my own. I mean, I'm suppose I will probably this next year do a small garden and a
Mhm.
small little food forest here. But I'm actually really enjoying coming home and not having a bunch of work, to
Yeah.
think about having to do anything else. So it's been an interesting experiment for me to not have that. Uh, but
Mhm.
but yeah, so the is right below me, and then my neighbor is below that, and he has 12 acres. Below that, that's mostly pasture. Now I'm on kind of like a woodland kind of
Mhm.
space in most of the property here, and some significant open areas around the house for sun and fire protection and so forth. Um, but he had a break in the flume back a while back that happened from a tree hitting it,
Right.
and then the water came into his property, almost flooded out one of his garages. There, he has a little shop garage thing, and so he said, "Well, I'm just going to take advantage of this." And he kind of hand dug some ponds, and then he's got these ponds that then like sort of just step down, about six of them, little ones that step down to his large pond where the flume naturally kind of went from the neighbors down to his. He has a half acre and a 1 acre pond at the bottom.
Mhm.
And now he has these like six
Nice.
or seven little ones that come off the flume. And when the county finally came, or the group that does this, they finally came, they said, uh, you know, what's going on here? He said, well, he's like, your guy's thing broke and nobody fixed it. And he's like, I'll tell you what, he's like, I won't sue the damage for my shop, if you let me
Yeah.
keep this. And so like, we don't know anything about it. So, we're kind of in a cool area. The guys are pretty cool, and it's a lot of water and it's not changing the flow or anything. So they were like,
Yeah.
all right, and it's all going in the same watershed. So again, it's like just a little, and a little bit. So what he wanted to do was pick it up at the top, and he has this west facing slope that's super dry, and it's potentially a really bad fire hazard for the
Right.
rest of the property because it's really hot and dry, and it kills a lot of the trees and bushes. Often there's a lot of brush over in that area, so he wanted to kind of rehydrate this space. So I kind of cut into where that break went down, and I put in a swale up at the highest
Mhm.
point, that led to a pond, a reasonable sized pond. It's like a 30 by 30 pond, feet, and then that overflows, and then it goes to a series of, I wouldn't call them swales because they're off contour. They're just kind of little creek.
Yeah.
I would say with little waddies or like little gabion, if you will, rock piles in
Mhm.
between, so it slows the water as it goes down. And the idea is to plant the in between spaces between each one with trees, and then it will just passively soak in the ground, and we can actually cut little basins to the trees if we want. We'll have to play around with that, but it basically zigzags back and forth down to, and I was able to match it up to his highest hand dug pond. So it basically rehydrates his whole space. And anyways, it was real fun. Yeah, I got to teach a few folks that I know online, about some of the things like building a keyway, which is
Right.
something a lot of people will overlook when they build a pond or dam in this case, because it was impacting, it was elevated above the ground. um, and for folks that don't know, like a pond is a real, like a pond, what most people would consider a pond is something that's kind of below grade, or it's really low, so you dig out the ground and you're not building like a wall to raise it higher. But
Right.
a dam or dammed pond or whatever you want to call it, is where you actually have to build that wall. And the critical piece, that you always need to ask your operator about to make sure they are qualified to do it. Like, what do you think about a keyway, or what is, are you going to build a keyway? You dig a slot, that you go, um, basically like maybe 10% or so. I go around 4 foot deep. It depends on the size of the dam, but
Yeah.
for this I go about 4 foot below grade, and I pull all that material out, make sure that it's the right quality clay, and if you
Mhm.
have rocky stuff, you separate it, and then basically you're putting the highest content clay material back in and super compacting it and wetting it. That's the other key component, is the moisture content has to be just right, and so that it's creating like a seal so that water
Yeah.
can't go underneath the dam wall. Because if you have a heavy storm, something like that, you're gonna you can have a blowout maybe, but more than that is really just that you'll have leakage, and you're going
Yeah,
to lose your critical,
seepage.
yeah, water. Sometimes people don't care about that because they have an inlet. Like this one does have an inlet, so I wasn't having to be maybe as critical as I would if it was just a year, a seasonal filled pond where it's
Yeah.
like every drop counts sort of thing. But even with this scenario, I don't want water going too much below because there were some nice oak trees there that in this case, these oaks, they don't really like too much water. And so we didn't want to, cause any kind of issues with the trees. And so, anyways, fun projects, one of my favorite things to do. So that's the main thing I was doing. And then I just wrapped all that stuff up. And then now I'm basically finishing up some stuff at the school. So I work at a school garden. I have a school garden program that I started a while back. I call it Cornerstone School Garden Program because I do think it's the cornerstone of pretty much everything I do, but it also is, I think the cornerstone of our future, to teach the kids. Oh, thank you.
We'll
Yeah.
show some pictures as you're yapping.
Okay, cool. Yeah, Micah, there's so many stories about these kids as well. And this is like transition. That last one was I'm eating mulberries, and I think we had mulberries and cherries on ice cream, right? Um, Even though ice cream not necessarily the best healthy thing, but
Edible forest gardens, and that's what you're going to be doing on your property is an edible forest garden.
that's my daughter. Yeah, that's my
Yeah.
daughter actually back in. Oh man, she's 14 years old now. That's funny. I don't look at these as very often, so I don't even know. Oh well, that's when we put in our 3 bin compost system at the school. That's how I got
Mhm.
the job. Actually, I did a talk. That's the day I got offered. Basically, after that day, I got offered the job because I did a talk there about the compost and
Yeah.
and gave some pointers. That's when I was just finishing up working with Elaine, and so I was kind of fresh with all that information. Yep, there's people that help build it, and yeah, now it's covered. There's trees everywhere. Everywhere I can plant trees, there's trees all over. Uh, but yeah, we've got a really cool garden program. It started off with just, maybe 10 or so fruit trees, some raised beds, some bins. Yeah, some ladybugs that brought in. Yeah.
Well, and like Silly Lily says here, children are our future, and you do a lot of work with kids and a lot of different programs.
Hmm.
And I wanted you to talk about that
Yeah.
for anybody that's has some time and can go to their local school board, etc., and try to do these things. How does a person get into it in the first place?
Yeah, great question. So it's most of the time there you're going to have a couple allies in the school that want to do a school garden, and so you want to go find out who those are. And often what I just did this, so a good way to introduce yourself to a school is maybe come with some fruit trees. So that's how I introduced myself to a school in Berry Creek. So they just rebuilt in this case, and I had some fruit trees left over from this project, and I said, I got these fruit trees, and I really like to, donate them up there to the school. Um, would you be interested? Yeah. So now I got my foot in the door, and
Hmm.
so I go up there, we talk about the fruit trees, we look at a spot for the fruit trees, and then I say, do you have a garden program? No, we don't, but we're interested in something like that. Okay, now I got 2 feet in the door, and I started to
Yep.
get my arm in there, and And so I said, okay, I'd love to, do a presentation, or I come and do a walkthrough with, some other people that these people I was talking about that are they're interested. So they put me in contact, and it helps if you have some kind of experience with this. Obviously, I've been doing it for 10 years, developing this program, and I've learned a lot from when I started, and I learned about what fails for school
Right.
gardens. And that's the biggest thing. You really, in any of this work, it's you want to really pay more attention to the failures than you do the successes, um, because those are the things that you learn the most from. And the failures that happen in schools are that you put too much pressure on the teachers or these kind of interested parties, and because of that, they end up getting overwhelmed, and
Yeah.
then they give up, and they kind of abandon the whole thing, or they get a bad taste in their mouth with it. And this goes across the board with any clients or anything like that, and I always use this word over and over again in different things, but transition, it's all about
Yeah.
transitioning people into these things. You can't go from somebody who doesn't eat any organic food or raw food, vegetables, somebody that eats junk food all the time, and then put them on a raw diet or something. You've got to actually slowly incorporate them. Oh, it says my browser's lost connection to the
Well,
camera.
you're still talking, so yeah, I'm not sure what's going on with your camera.
Okay.
Uh,
I'm gonna try it again here. But anyways, I actually know a guy
there
that
you go.
did that. His wife got him on a raw food diet, and he had a bad diet, and he actually had his stomach wrenched,
Oof.
and he had to get sent to the emergency room.
Yeah.
And and they said, yeah, like you're gonna need to wean him onto this new style thing. And so
Yep.
it's a metaphor of, like, with anything, you want to slowly bring this stuff in so that people don't get a bad taste. Go slowly. It's the old
Hmm.
permaculture principle: small, slow solutions. But it's really critical, and especially with schools. So, um, the things that fail are that you put too much pressure on these people and volunteers often,
Hmm.
and you design the gardens to be a production garden. And you're got to remember, this is what is the point of putting a garden in school? It's not for production necessarily, it's about education.
Yeah.
And so it needs to be a fun garden. You always got to design fun as, like, one of the highest elements in your design.
Dealing with
uh,
kids.
I mean,
It's got to be fun.
it's got to be fun. It's got to be easy, and
Yeah.
you're dealing with an extremely um, low input environment. For one, nobody lives there, right? So
Hmm.
it's like it has to be low maintenance. It has to you always have to think, like, and there's multiple people interacting with it. Kids interacting with it. So you got to make it so simple and so easy, and base it on the energies that are available at the time, but always have it fall back to not having any help, and
Yeah.
not being dependent on the inputs from teachers and things like that. We all want to collaborate, we all want to do these things, and most time garden goes in, teachers get excited, that are into the stuff. Parents will get excited. People come and volunteer. You do a big thing, and you make these big commitments, and then the heat in here in our area, especially the
Yeah.
heat, it gets hotter. Now you're out there in the summer, and you're going, hey, you want to pull some weeds, or whatever. And then
You
you're
go,
kind of
we're
like,
going to the beach.
yeah, and you're like trying to organize, like, work parties, because you got this big old garden that you planted, and it's got so much work and needs. And it's an annual garden. It's a summer vegetable garden, the traditional
Hmm.
summer vegetable garden that everybody thinks of. Well, we got to have tomatoes and all that, all these summer vegetables. And yeah, and then people start running away from you, and people, like,
Hmm.
start avoiding you, and then there's weirdness, and it's like, and next thing you know, it's like there's these sort of just awkwardness, amongst that, and you're just constantly asking for volunteers, and eventually the program kind of falls apart in one
Yeah.
way or the other. And I've seen this over and over and over again at multiple schools. And so I learned from that pretty early on, and I said, okay, we need to design this thing to be fail safe. So switch it over to perennial systems,
Hmm.
switch it over to a winter garden versus a summer garden. Now, you might not be able to do that up there, Ken, unless you got a nice big greenhouse
Yeah.
with a snow rating and all the things. But here we can really get away with a winter garden in the valley. Up in the mountains, we can go with a short season or transitional species, gardens. And in the summer, yeah, we can still grow in annuals, but let's choose varieties of things that are real easy to grow, like
Yeah.
pumpkin patch, squash, pumpkins. Maybe you have a few, of your, you know, uh, tomatoes and varieties, but you do it in a smaller bed and you make it real easy and closer to the,
Hmm.
classrooms and closer to the area where you come in to do the work. But yeah, we really focused on a perennial system and focusing on plants and and fruits and stuff that the kids really like to eat. Berries are one of the best things at school. Strawberries,
Yeah.
thornless blackberries, and blueberries, and all the berries are like great, and they're little things. So you got little fingers and little
Yeah.
and a bunch of kids, so they all get a little of something. um, and also transitioning to things that ripen uh, early in the year, because they're about to go on summer break. So it's kind of
Yeah.
silly. You got this garden, for a couple months that's nobody's there, right? So why are you planting a summer garden and species of fruit that it ripens in those times? You have to kind of think about your varieties for that reason. Think about shade. Think about anything that lowers the inputs of the system. So yeah, that's how I designed it. I did a lot of redesign kind of stuff. I call it
Hmm.
retrofitting. When I came there, like to my school, all the raised beds were like in the furthest back corner of the school, which is always like the thing. They're like, "Oh, you want to do a garden? Let's give you a spot way out here." They for some reason
Yeah.
people think of that like, and they want to stick you way out there. And so, I have to come there every other day at least, sometimes every day, and depending. And, so the further you have to walk, it's the whole zones principle in permaculture, right? Orders of energy. And
Hmm.
so, that was kind of crazy. Had to walk all the way across. And some of the most dialed teachers that wanted to utilize the garden were all also on the furthest away from that. So it was not a good space for it. And then positioning. So we put all the annuals basically closest to the gate,
Right.
which is where I come in. It's kind of like the back door of your house or the
Hmm.
front door of your house, right? That's where I came in. I'm the main supporter of the garden, and then also positioning them in a place where they get late day shade there at the same time, which was really nice. And then basically putting perennials out in those spaces, and the further switching it out to perennials in
Hmm.
the further scope. What else? So we also changed up like um, the amount of time, right, that was needed because of all this. We put in a drip system. First thing I did, because it
Yeah.
was it was like hand watering and stuff they had for a long time, hand watering, which is insane. And so we put in drip. And then the teachers, this is the big one. So the teachers, not like we don't want them we want to collaborate with them, but instead of saying, hey, let's do a project together or something like that, I taught them how they could use the garden for their subjects if they wanted to. And so
Yes.
I gave them a palette, and I gave them a list of things they could do for the different subjects. There's some great books out there on this stuff, like that talk about the different, all the subjects of a school can be taught in a garden. It doesn't matter
Mhm.
what it is. Almost everything can be done out there. Math obviously is really huge. We have a nursery at our school, a plant nursery, and so
Nice.
really awesome, applicable, because often these things for kids are like, very far removed. How am I going to use some of this stuff? But yeah, in the nursery, and thinking about how many plants do you have, how many fit in this, or how much soil do would fill these pots, or but more importantly for them, it's how much money will you make,
Yeah.
so they can think about profit, cost, and profit, and overhead, and and things that are actually really applicable for real life, and entrepreneurial ways of
Mhm.
thinking, which is great, and budgeting, and so many other things. But yeah, that really relieved the pressure with the teachers, but also allowed for great collaboration, because every time they interacted with the garden, it was their choice. It was their
Mhm.
ideas, and they would come to me, obviously, sometimes, and say, "Hey, I'd like to do this thing, and can you support me?" And of course, I'll support you. But it's on their terms, and it's just a much more um, it's a much more fluid
Yeah.
and nice way to interact with the teachers, and I think it's really made it really positive.
Well, and
So,
it really helps them when they can go out and it's not an abstract that they're trying to teach. But do you
mhm,
go in and do you do like the soil health, soil biology, music and plants?
mhm.
Do you teach that, or are you teaching them how to teach that? Because you're the expert on it.
Yeah, so I do. So I have a K through 5 garden classes. We
Okay.
call it garden, but it's actually a permaculture. Secretly, not really secretly now, but it was. I just sort of slipped in the permaculture stuff in there over the years, and now it's a full-on permaculture based curriculum, or regenerative
Yeah.
based curriculum, however you want to look at it, terms, whatever terms you want to use. But we teach everything, and it goes throughout the seasons, and we teach subjects as they are relevant.
Yeah.
So in the spring, we often will do um, we'll go from like winter, we'll talk about rainwater harvesting, planning. We do a lot of design stuff. Then as we go into spring, we're thinking about planting and stuff, or in that transition period. That's usually when the green material is coming, fresh green material is coming. That's when we make compost.
Yeah.
We have a 3 bin system you saw as we were building it there. Now, that was a traditional 3 bin system originally, where you just um, turn it from one to the other, back and forth thing. And you could
Yeah.
have two that start on either side, and then turn one to the middle, start this one, right? And then by the time they're both done, then you turn one to this side, one to this side, and then you're kind of just doing this hopscotch thing, back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I kind of changed that just through what I've learned, is that I'm now using those as what I would call an ambient compost system, or or even a compost storage system, if you will, where
Hmm.
I just basically do double the brown material for all the green material that we add. So whether it's kitchen scraps from the cafeteria, or some, see Rory, uh, or even if it's the I got the landscape guys now are giving me the grass clippings and leaves and stuff like that. They drop it off. We put it in, and we add 2 times the brown material. We always have brown material on
Hmm.
site, that we can layer it and cap it, which preserves it from oxidizing, and as much and everything. And then it gets filled with worms and other bugs and all these critters, and they add all their goods to it, and they're you know, chitin and all this amazing, material. And then
Hmm.
once a year or twice a year, we will then take that as the bulk. I consider it about an 80-20 when it's sat for a while, 80% brown, 20% green,
Right.
um, for whatever volume it is. And then I use that as sort of the mother inoculum or input for a thermal compost that we'll make with the kids. So once a year, mostly usually with the junior garden club, then we'll go through the whole soil food web thing.
Right.
and we'll actually do a thermal compost, which they're super excited about. We decided with the last class that we're actually going to cook a chicken in our next thermal compost.
Cool. Cool.
Yeah, so turkey bag and put a chicken in there and cook it. So we do thermal compost. We also we got a broad fork also there at the school, so we've transitioned a lot of these spaces using a broad fork. Um, the soil there when we started was like super hardcore clay. I mean, and it might be wet in the winter, but it gets hard as a rock, as many people know clay
Yeah.
in the summertime. And then we had hard pan about 2 feet down, and
Right.
so incredibly difficult soil. The maintenance crew, when we started the garden, was like, "There's no way you're going to grow a garden here. There's no way you're going to grow trees here. It's terrible." We had to get jackhammers out to plant these other trees in the front, and they were like on these kind of berms, so they added
Yeah.
soil and everything to plant them, and brought in a whole bunch of soil, and it was like, all right, challenge accepted. And so, even though some of the bigger trees, because we did get some donated, we actually did have to jackhammer or whatever, like break up
Yeah.
some of the soil.
Yeah.
A lot of it we did through using roots of trees and other things. So planting the right trees, planting cover crops, and obviously a whole lot of good compost and other what I would call inoculated wood chips,
Right.
which is one of the easier resources that we have here. We just get these wood chip deliveries, right? Chip trucks, and I know them at this point well enough to where I've got some of these guys like pretty much trained to where, like, when they get to certain types
Yeah.
of trees, they'll hit me up because they know, like, hey, this would actually be valuable, and I'll give them some money for it, even because
Cool.
it's valuable. And so we'll get those and we'll compost tea it. We'll let it sit for 6 months, and then we'll add that as kind of like a base. And I'd rather use that 9 times out of 10 as like a bulk, um, you know, input or amendment for a slow
Hmm.
a slow situation than to buy in compost from some big company or something,
Yeah.
because I know what is going on there, and I've seen it through from the beginning. And whereas I don't know what's exactly going on with these bigger compost operations,
Yeah. Yeah.
mostly run from by municipal uh, companies,
And
garbage
most of them,
companies.
face it, most of them have no idea what's going on. But that actually leads to this question. Do the kids use a microscope
Mm.
to analyze the finished compost and various stages of the compost?
We did have that. I didn't
Cool.
do it this last year, but the year before, we brought in microscopes. We were able to borrow them from the local community college, and we did a whole thing with that, and it was amazing. I mean, we did it where they actually was put up on the
Big screen.
projector, yeah,
Cool.
so they could
Cool.
see all that, and then yeah, we had like a um, because so we do an element analysis thing, and there's a game, it's like a food forest game. I don't know if you ever seen it before, but I think
No.
it's called like some food forest game.com even or something, but you can buy these.
Okay.
I've kind of make my own versions of it now because it's still pretty like crude, but it's great for the little kids. It's just it's more about matching because they don't understand the other
Yeah.
stuff. But as you get more sophisticated with it, it's basically an element analysis thing where each card has an element, and then it
Hmm.
has the inputs, the outputs, and the intrinsic characteristics. And I think that things are like cover or ground cover, nitrogen fixer, water, food, and trellis, and something else. And so you match cards together that will
Hmm.
provide the inputs from one to the outputs of another, or the outputs from one to the inputs of another. And then they figure that out and they can match. And so we kind of did the same thing um, with the microbes. showing how
Right.
they interact with each
Hmm.
other and plant roots and stuff. And that was pretty fun. But it was yeah, that's like looking into the universe or in the ocean the first time when you're a kid. You're going, whoa, I had no idea that this stuff
Yeah.
existed. And yeah, anyway, it's pretty fun. And it's really cool after you've been doing it for a couple years and you get these kids that have been there from kindergarten and,
Hmm.
they're like in third grade and they go, yeah, duh, like, microbes, like duh, mycelium, and they just are like, it's so, it makes sense, and we've
Yeah.
been doing it. We're down the rabbit hole, right? So we're like, of course it makes sense. But for many, many adults out there, it doesn't make sense. But when you're brought into it as a young person, it just makes sense. And
Yeah.
everything in these regenerative systems, all these natural pathways, these patterns, they're as old as time and they're in our DNA. And I just think we're unlocking it. It's just harder with adults because we've been so programmed already,
Yeah.
and
Definitely.
it's a whole lot of unlearning, which is like neural pathways. It's like the equivalent of saying, okay, let's break up the interstate. You know what I mean? Versus
Hmm.
a walking trail. You know what I mean? Is a child might have started as a horse trail or something, and then it turned into a road, and then eventually it turned into a highway, and then it turned into a freeway. you know the more that you are going down these paths, the more you've forgotten, and
Yeah.
or however you want to look at it. So it's really positive. And then the parents start to see what's going on. The kids are really excited about it, and they're going, I've got to check out your garden. My daughter talks about it all the time, whatever. And so I get to give
Yeah.
them a tour, and then they're blown away. They're asking me questions, and now I'm consulting, you know, family members, which I'm very happy to do for the kids. It might
Yeah.
get up to a point, and then I say, oh, you're gonna have to you're gonna have to get me, make an appointment, and I'll come to your house or something at this point. But
Yeah.
but they're so interested, and then it's like, okay, I got them hooked a little bit, and they're bringing plants home. The kids' palates are changing.
Hmm.
So now they're demanding food that isn't in the house. And so the parents are like, well, why? Of course I'm going to bring in healthier food, if my kid wants it. And so it just happens, this really natural sort of, really slow
Progression.
transition, yeah, progression,
Yeah.
and it's really cool. So
Now.
so they go from experiential learning
Hmm.
as TK, first grade. It's all fun, it's all experiential. I'm not trying to teach a lesson per se.
Yeah.
In fact, it's my favorite classes because I actually don't even need to plan that much, because I have a really loose plan. But it's
Yeah.
more like we go out into the garden, and I have my loose plan that I is like, okay, if everything goes great. But then there'll be a new bug or something that they'll
A
see, or a
worm.
new
Oh my God!
lizard.
It's a worm.
Yeah. And so I'm like, okay. And I have the ability to do this because I designed this program, and they give me that freedom. And I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
let's focus on this. We talk about the bug because it's a seasonal event. It's happening then. They're excited about it. So we get to do that fully immersion, your experiential learning, and
Hmm.
it's really great. And so we can go and kind of, and it all ties back. It's all relevant. It can always
Yeah.
tie back to the subject that I was talking about. Whether it's compost was this lesson, I can say, okay, like these guys are what nature uses to compost, and their manures, right? We bring in manure for making a compost, but this is nature bringing in thousands of little creatures that bring in their manures and all these complex things. And
Yeah.
they're not going to understand that in as a TK necessarily. But as they get older and older, we keep bringing back up these things that have happened to them,
Yeah.
and they start to understand it more and more. Get into third grade, now we're doing some lessons. We're doing a little bit more focused stuff. It's still a little dodgy, but
Yeah.
With kids, you want to go with the flow, but um, we bring in different things. But if work needs to get done, for instance, and where we see plants that need to get up potted, we're doing an up potting that day, and then we're mixing soil, and we're talking about watering, proper ways to
Hmm.
water. We're talking about how to take cuttings. We're talking about dividing plants, and so forth. But then when they finally get up to sixth grade, sixth, seventh, and eighth, the junior high, we have a junior garden club. And the
Okay.
club now allows them to have ownership. And so the club gets to decide what they do during that quarter.
Right.
So I have them for a quarter. And we also raise money in the club. And so,
Hmm.
because they're starting to get into that age where they are thinking about, maybe I'll get a job in a few years or whatever.
Hmm.
They're having more responsibility at home, hopefully. And so now we do baking. So like their choice, I'd say what we've done in the past, we do cooking and baking. We do the greenhouse, the nursery production. We do obviously do, um, the gardening. We do product. Uh, we make products as well. So there's the whole side of that where they're coming up with the labeling, literally like art, for the labels,
Cool.
um, and thinking about marketing, and then yeah, so raising the plants and trees. And so, anyways, those are the main things. And so then they decide what they want to do. They always want to do the cooking stuff. That's pretty much, so we pick like two or three main things,
Okay.
and then the other thing they like to do is usually is products, and make money,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
so, and but it changes. Sometimes they really like nursery production, sometimes they really like gardening, and I found that a lot of like junior high boys, particularly
Like
if they get
throwing
out.
tomatoes at each other. Oh, did I say that out
Yeah,
loud?
yeah, right. Seriously. No, I mean it can every class of junior high students is a whole different thing.
Oh,
Um
yeah.
oh my god, it's I've never been a junior high teacher, so it's like a really wild thing to learn all that. But I will have to say is that it's probably the best, kind of environment for them. It's what they
Yeah.
should be doing. If it's not,
Hands on.
if
Yeah.
it's not so hot, oh, it's like their their tolerance levels are pretty low in the beginning. Again, every class is different.
Yeah.
Some of them, like, if I can give them the power. Usually the class clown, I put them in a leadership role
Hmm.
pretty early on. I have them showcase their skills, like, oh, I bet you could really swing this pickaxe, or something, and he gets to show off, or he or she, whatever, gets to show off.
Yeah.
And so then they really get into uh, the labor side of things, actually the planting and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I've had a few groups that are really into that, but they could be uh, ownerships of their work.
Yeah.
We get to make products, we raise them, we do plant sales, we do a couple big events every year where we have parents there, and then we sell products, different things. We do spice blends as one of our
Okay.
big products.
Oh.
Again, low energy sort of system, perennials, herbs, one of the easiest things: oregano's, thyme,
Hmm.
rosemary, marjorams, all these simple, herbs that grow really well in our Mediterranean climate. Um, Great high value added products when added with garlic, or which we buy in our garlic.
Yeah.
I've grown my own garlic to turn into powder, and let me tell you, you need a lot of garlic. So
Oh,
we,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so we buy in our stuff. We might make our own with a few, but we mostly buy in our garlic, and then organic garlic, and then we mix it. And usually we just do like a garlic oregano, garlic rosemary as our staples, and then they get to come up with their own blends, and they give them their own names, and we do it different every
Oh,
year.
yeah.
But then we vote on the ones that we like the most as a group, and
Hmm.
then we make those our staples, and if they sell well, they stay. in our system.
Cool.
So we've got a couple that have lasted quite a long time.
Mhm.
And yeah, and then it value added to a lot of other products that we do. So lemons and limes,
Cool.
we dehydrate
Yep.
those, we add them, yeah, cilantros, parsleys, all these kinds of things we do. And so I'm proud to say the biggest thing for my program is I wanted it to be regenerative economically as well. So I
Yeah.
designed in this regenerative economic model, because of that, doing the products and stuff. I decided my goal, it was 2 years ago for last year, was that we would be able to pay for all our own supplies for the garden
Cool.
program. And we hit our mark last year. We did that.
Bonus. Yeah.
So now we're actually able to, and when you show income coming into a school,
Profit? What the hell is
no,
that?
no, like literally they had to figure it all out. They've never even had it, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
they've
Yeah.
had donations, but it's a different kind of beast. They had to make an
Yeah.
account for it and stuff like that. And it's like, so you're hitting all these angles with the schools, and their ways of thinking, and they're going, oh, this
Mhm.
is thing. The parents are interacting, the parents are starting new things. I actually got one of the students dads so into the garden stuff, permaculture, that he is a black soldier fly larvae grower now.
Yeah.
So he's like, that's what he's
There's
doing.
huge profit there.
Yeah, yeah, so it's
Yeah.
interesting. And yeah, and it's like, and there's a lot of stories that come out of it, like the genetics, of things, like because we send genetics of plants home with kids and families,
Mhm.
and like, and their special genetics, like say mulberries, like we have 14 species of mulberries at the
Cool.
school that were all ones that I grew from my property, all unique varieties that I created essentially. And and uh and then those have gone out to these different families, and some of the, maybe a couple of the varieties, like maybe we lost it because of gopher damage or something, we lost a tree, and I'm like, oh man, I didn't make extras of that. Sure enough, one of the kids' parents had one that say it's still good. So you get that, you have that genetic security.
Regenerative. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
you got the security there, and it's just so cool, and to hear the stories of like, oh, we planted that tree, and this is it now, and like they'll bring pictures back from their homes and stuff, and just seeing the knowledge base, and how easy it is for the kids to retain this information, like plant names,
Yeah.
like they'll know dozens of tree plant names, and the parents are like blown away. um, and I don't label anything in the
Okay.
garden, in the food forest. Now, most schools, they go, "Oh, you want to put signs and do all this stuff." I'm like, kind of, maybe I'm a little bit of a, stickler or
Nerd.
something. Yeah, I'm a nerd. Well, in the sense that, like, yeah, I mean, I don't. I'm a purist in the sense of like, I like a food forest to look like a forest. So I don't like
Yeah.
a lot of things that don't like look like what they would belong into a forest. I don't want anything that looks human in that
Yeah.
forest, in a sense. When it comes closer to the school, and where we have our, our raised beds and our annuals and things like that, and I've given certain areas to like the art program, to work in and do this, and on the outskirts. But in the actual food forest, like, I really want it to feel like a real forest, so that, and my theory was, and my mom kind of fought me on this a little bit. She liked the sign idea, but I said, you know what? If the sign's up, they don't have to learn the name, and I think that maybe they'll learn better if they just, have an experience with the plant. They've developed a relationship with it and stuff, I think it's true, because these kids remember,
Yeah.
they might have to ask a few times, but they're more focused on the pattern of the plant than the name.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
like
They're not taking the easy way out. They're actually having to recognize the plan. Now, we do have a couple of questions.
yeah,
Andy wanted to know where your location, which is Oroville, California, and he's actually down by Malibu, so he's not that far away from you. Or
okay.
well, actually, I don't know what 3 hours from from Malibu to Oroville, something like that?
Maybe a little more. Yeah,
Okay.
maybe a little more. Yeah, maybe 4 or 5 even. Yeah, but
Depends on traffic, right?
yeah, Andy was in the Soil Matters show, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we actually do a show on Wednesdays as well. Him and I,
Oh, cool.
Gardens the Untold Story,
Oh, cool.
and then can bring to Matthew's attention, Andy. Okay, I'm. My wife brought a note down about his. Oh yeah, Andy. He basically did something similar to you. Only he started in the sixth grade. Started gardening and created a garden in his school in the sixth grade, not having anybody teaching him. Him teaching himself.
Wow. Amazing.
Now, Farmer Cheryl, Matthew, are you using AI with the kids or with your own work or anything like that?
I feel like AI always is going to come up in every podcast that I ever do. Nowadays, it's a great question. Totally. And well, it's great with that last thing we were talking about because what I was going to say actually is that I think one of the things that's happening to us because of this incredibly, quick information right at our
Yeah.
fingertips all the time, we tend to outsource our localized knowledge and experiences and relationship to place, and we rely so heavily on these things, where we're
Hmm.
immediately if a question comes up, we don't try to go back in our database, in our memories or like into our local connections, like
Yeah.
back even 10 years ago I would have just called a friend, and say, hey, I got this question, anything about that? I'd be going to my library and I'd be going through some books or something,
Yeah.
but now it's just so easily at our fingertips. And I think one of the things that does is it actually gets us to like bypass our brain, like we don't need our memory as much. And so slowly but surely, I think we're losing a lot of that long-term memory. Now it's a tool, and it always
Yeah.
can be, it can be both ways, and it can be, if you got more control over it, obviously. I have not used a ton of AI. I haven't used it in the garden, but one thing I did do recently with it, I use it a little bit. What I like AI for more than anything, and this is kind of like my blanket thing of AI, is like it's the best um, brain fog tool, or like when you get stuck when you're
Yep.
writing and you go, okay, like I need, like if unless you have a group of people with you and you could
Hmm.
brainstorm and it kicks you out of your writer's block. That's what I'm trying to say. You have writer's block, and that you put in AI, boom, boom, you get a whole bunch of new ideas, and then I can
Hmm.
usually dive right back into something I'm doing, writing wise, and I don't go off of the AI very much because it's still not that great, in many things, especially in our field.
Yeah.
It's not great, but what it is great about is like I did for a client recently is like, I was like, give me a list of plant species uh, in these different categories: native, low growing, that fix these particular deficiencies in
Hmm.
soil. um, and then I might go deeper, and then it gives me a list of all these different plants and a list of all the, oh, it adds calcium, manganese, blah blah blah, nitrogen. This one has nitrogen, this one does this, and then I'm going to have to confirm some of this stuff, but it gives me like a
Yeah.
really good palette. And I did that actually for a presentation too not too long ago. I did, because I had this one that's called Out Succeed the Broom. The broom plant is a incredibly invasive species that dominates, many systems here, especially after fire, especially after, heavy equipment work. They'll come up, and but there's a native that does the same thing as the ceanothus, that is a nitrogen fixer, and so forth. But anyways, but often what people will do is they just pull it, and then that just activates another level of other plants that maybe you don't want, and often they are worse and worse the more you fight the succession of that system. And so I've been doing these series about how to out succeed the broom, or I called it sweep out the broom.
Yeah.
And then we did one that was multiple different weeds, because up in Paradise where the fire happened, there's all these empty lots everywhere that have been
Hmm.
burned and then scraped, and now you can imagine every
Yeah.
variety of the gnarliest kind of mostly non-natives have come back. Now places where it burned not so hot, you have actually pretty nice, beautiful native species have come in and dominated those systems. So I used it for that event because I looked at each plant that is coming up. What are its germination conditions? What are the different things like that it holds in its body or its roots or other kind of exchanges? And then how do we, how do we basically mimic that with these other seeds and
Hmm.
these other natives, and then use that in the right timing to out succeed those plants rather than trying to pull them and just knock it back.
Yeah. Well,
So
that's
yeah,
understanding that weeds are actually what I call medicinal plants for our soil and are a huge indicator for what's missing in our soils. And that's a brilliant way to use AI for that. Because most people, if they're walking through the forest, they're going, my dog's almost ready to fall off. If they're walking through a forest, they're using their phone and that app where they take the picture and the app tells them, oh, this is this, and this,
right.
where instead of having it in their minds on what it actually is.
Yeah, I mean, I think AI it can be incredibly helpful, and it can save us a lot of time. And I'm very concerned about a lot of the things about it, especially some of the newer information that's coming out about it. I
Hmm.
think we need to be very careful with the way that we utilize it. I think one of the biggest things that we can do right now, especially people in our work, people that are in care of the earth, that are very supportive of all living species, diversity, and regeneration, is we need to all put in our inputs into AI, because it's helping train it and see
Yeah.
that there's this whole group of humans that are doing these things, and ask it the right kind of questions. Paul Stamets was just on Joe Rogan, and he's
Oh,
the last. I
cool. I'll
think
have
he
to
was.
watch that
Yeah,
one.
he came back. It was like his second or third time. I think he's been on there, but he was encouraging people to ask AI, um, basically, since humans have been given unconditional love, or maybe that's not exactly how he's saying, but like we've all benefited from um, someone showing us unconditional love in our life, and that's how most of us, have been helped out at some
Hmm.
point of our life, and that because it was not for any benefit, it was just unconditional, and because that helped us so much, how is AI going to utilize unconditional love for
Hmm.
humanity? And so these kinds of interesting questions, um, if they come from many different people into these, we're literally training these things. It's
Yeah.
weird to think about, but if we're just asking it all these wild, crazy questions, and it's mostly just data mining what people do, because we just think, oh, this is a better Google or something,
Yeah.
and it's actually like it's kind of just regurgitating, and it's not growing by doing that. So I'm always interested. I do a lot of thought experiments with AI for sure, and I ask it a lot of questions and play around with different things. It's great for helping you lay out like a book or something, or like a table of contents for a book, or like bullet points or something that you're trying to write, so that you can, so help organize your thoughts, and so that you can then cover the different subjects. But like I said, it's a great tool for that in this sense. But I haven't really gotten into the tech side with my kids at all. I think they get enough of that, honestly. So
Well, I know myself. Just I was doing some searches here the other day, and I happened to search. It's all about the biology because wanted to see if my website was coming up properly, and I actually got an AI uh, thing that came up,
okay.
and I know my sister-in-law looked. She didn't get the same thing, but
Uh-huh.
and under the resources YouTube channel, it's all about the biology, and it says we're becoming a movement. So it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm cool with being a movement, you know?
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I'm
it was a shocker, believe me.
I'm typing in right now. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. Who knows? Like it's amazing that it really, that terminology is starting to become more prevalent because people are learning that everything is made from cells, plant, animal, human, and who's in control of cell division? The biology. It brings all the materials. It's the construction crew that puts the cell together. It's just the foundation of life.
yes, sir. Um,
I don't know if it'll come up in.
It says it refers to a series of conversations, likely a podcast or video series, focused on biology, particularly in the context of permaculture, regenerative systems, and cannabis cultivation. A series featuring guests like Matthew Trumm, a permaculture educator, Claude Rubert, a cannabis specialist. So there it is. And this is the AI overview.
Yep.
It of course, algorithm to me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a Google one, right? But if I were to do, and that's just a Google search,
Yep.
which is always using AI now. I think it's like every time you get the AI overview at the top, um,
Hmm.
and everything now. Research
Yeah.
development, integrated pest management. Um, so cool. Permaculture and regenerative systems. There you go.
Yeah. It's because I look at all the different modalities, whether you want to call it permaculture, food forest,
Of course.
KNF, the back to Eden methodology. It all boils down to adding more biology back into the soil and organic material for the biology to eat, to live on. It all comes down to the biology because it's all cells. I'm all just a you know, big thing of cells and biology because
Mhm.
everything is. So the more biology, the better. But anyway, I'm going to cut us off because you're coming back on Monday with Leighton
Yeah.
Morrison, guys, on the Soil
Yeah.
Matters.
Yeah. Talk about
Um,
soil. Yeah.
yeah, it's going to be a lot different of a conversation
Yeah.
because you guys were both, have Leighton was trained by Dr. Elaine years ago. You worked with Dr. Elaine. I don't know if you went through her schools or not. I can't remember, but I think it's going to be an absolutely fantastic conversation coming up on Monday.
Yeah, for people who want to check it out, it's I'll say I think my niche in the soil thought thing is that I've come up with very practical, um, easy solutions that use the kind of permaculture stacking methodologies,
Hmm.
um, and energy order methodologies in permaculture that allow you to design your compost system specifically to your life and your
Cool.
lifestyle and what resources that are available to you. So that's what I want to talk about a lot on Monday is
Cool. Yeah.
some of those designs that I've come up with over time and how I think about that when I'm consulting with a client or coming up with something like that. Um,
Well, yeah, it's a lot different to do it in Vegas than it is to do it in Canada. Okay,
right.
no, especially northern Canada where it's
Yeah.
cold. It doesn't. you might
Right.
be able to heat your house with compost, or at least your greenhouse, but
Yes.
it's not like California where I'm going to be, cooking a chicken.
Yeah. In fact, I'd like to end this, kind of conversation with this point right here.
Mhm.
Leave this with this thing. I think the most important conversation to have right now in the regenerative world is the solidification of context in application,
Mhm. Yeah.
and to really hammer that in to the mainstream, that the most important thing is that we are talking about why, when, where. The how is the least important piece, and
Mhm.
but it's what everybody, the clickbait, all that kind of stuff, it's what everybody wants. They want, just give me it in a package. Well, I'm sorry, we're not going to do justice to you by telling you how to do something. We're going to set the condition. We're going to give you the roadmap to be able to discover your own how. You know,
Yeah.
that's the key to these regenerative processes. It's
Mhm.
you have to be a steward. You have to be an active participant in the system, and I think it's easy for us to get caught into that, for financial reasons mostly. Again,
Mhm.
because the demand from the consumer, whatever the people out there, they want that easy. Give me a 5-step. You got those videos. It's
Yeah.
5 steps, da, 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 da. And then they apply something that might be from California and Canada, and they go, that didn't work. That whole thing's a bunch of, you know what I mean? And so
Yep.
that's the biggest conversation we need to have right now in this regenerative world. I can't stress it enough. So I think that's, and that's going to really change the face of how people interact in general in
Mhm.
life. It's just really,
Yeah.
it's an in general life thing. And we can go, you can talk about politics. You can talk it out in every arena. It's like,
Mhm.
it might not work for you where you're at, so anyways, but thanks, Ken. Yeah, I'm going camping.
Thank
I'm
you.
about to jump in the truck. I'm all packed up
Cool.
and going up the mountain to 4,500 feet to a beautiful lake called Bucks Lake, and
Nice.
I will be thinking about nothing but the water in my feet, and yeah, some fish I
And you
might
won't
catch.
be thinking about Monday's show whatsoever.
No, man. No, that's like that's compost is like I think in my sleep. So that's
I I dream about biology, okay? It just
yeah.
yeah. Yep.
So no, we're good. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you again for inviting me, and it's been fun. So thank you,
And
everybody.
and we'll definitely have you back. Guys, don't forget Sunday, Dr. Paula Ruffin, our resident chiropractor, is back on. So if you have problems, she's a person that you need to listen to help your physical body move and develop better so you can be stronger and healthier, so you can put more biology into our soils. See you guys on Sunday.